Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Sorry I didn't get a video out for the Fisher playoffs. I was a little caught up with Star Ladder at the time and couldn't get a video out. And I would have been going to do a video because I think I did pretty good overall, so my advice would have been decent, but hey, unlucky. At least I can do one for Pro League for you, even if it is a little last minute. Sorry again. And this one's a fun one because we have Swiss groups again, which are always the best of fantasy. We've also got a lot of really weird teams, right? We've got some pretty solid ones in Furia, G2, and Astralis. But then the rest are kind of in this weird state, whether they've either made recent roster changes or they've got stand-ins. I mean, Inner Circle's a completely new roster, right? Like, there's a lot of strange things going on here. Gentlemate's just got the invite over Lin Vision, who pulled out. There's a lot of oddness here. So that does mean that I think you can get a little creative with some of your picks, particularly on those mid-level teams. Like I think teams like Bait, for instance, could be pretty solid to look into. I think Gamer Legion, even though they've made that change, I think, you know, when you're making a change and it's the AWPer and you brought in an AWPer that on paper should be better, I think that should slot in pretty well. But yeah, I think that, you know, you'd avoid teams maybe like 3D Max, but I think definitely rooting in G2, Astralis, Furia makes a lot of sense. And then have some fun with the teams that you think have the best value. So let's take a look at players. Let's see who has the best value. So starting with Furia, I don't really think this team is worth drafting more than one player, and I think the only player worth drafting is Yukinda. Yuri doesn't deserve the 215 for how he's been playing, and Kesarada and Molodoi, as good as they are, they do not deserve to be drafted at 227 and 230, so they're both a pass, and Yukinda's the only one worth drafting. I think with G2, you do have some better options with both Malbs and Sun Pius about that 215 kind of territory, which I would argue they deserve a little bit more than Yuri does, for instance. I think Mattis and Heavy God are too expensive, though, similar to these two. And Hunter's decent value as well. So there's kind of like more players on G2, and I think you could double up on G2, whereas you can't double up on Furia, because I don't really think Fallen's worth drafting. 3D Max you don't really want to touch because Navira is playing instead of Maka, and he's not really the same caliber of player, unfortunately. So I think they're going to struggle because of that. But I think Astralis is brilliant value across the board. The only player I'd maybe suggest not drafting is Hooksy. I've seen he's one of the most popular drafts, and I think that's probably a big mistake. I'm sure he's been playing pretty decent, but I think for 191, there's better picks from some of the tier 2 teams. And I think if you're going Astralis, because their pricing is really good, you're better off going more onto their better players. You know, get Magisk and then one of the other three, or hell, get Device and Stare. Really nice combo. VP, I don't really think they're worth drafting, never have been, and I don't think this is a good event for them. Gamer Legion, I think are worth drafting. I think they're definitely, I won't call them sleeper because they're a pretty known entity at this point, but Hypex is a really good addition to this team. You know, he's going to slot into Kersey's position very comfortably, and I think will definitely be a good performer. And for 204, actually feels really reasonable. Obviously, PR and Res are the players you want to draft here. I'm not entirely convinced that their pricing is good for them when you could get some Pius, you know, for the same price, but maybe just because the field is a bit weaker here, these two get a little bit higher value than they otherwise would. Heroic are interesting just because they've got some cheap players like Xcloud for 201. I quite like that pricing. I like Youngster's price, like Alcarin's price. A little bit of a risky team, but again, another team that I think really needs to perform in these final events of the year because the major cutoff is really like they're on the cusp, right? So they can't afford to bomb out of the remaining events they have. So I think that will light a bit of fire under them. I think Legacy are very sleeper here. Just because so many of these other teams are going through transitional phases, you can definitely grab a Demal and maybe catch people off guard if, you know, Legacy go through, because I think they should, whether that's 3-1 or 3-2. I'm pretty confident in Legacy doing well here, so I really don't hate drafting them. Same with M80, although I'm not entirely convinced on M80. Sometimes they're brilliant, sometimes they're not quite brilliant, but I think in an event like this, with the type of competition, they could definitely get through. But I like it if they're a little bit cheaper. I really like Bait's pricing. I thought they did pretty good at Star Ladder. Particularly Kenzie's Law, I thought was really impressive. Hedrick and MPL are also really good prices, so I don't hate just grabbing one Bait player because they're a bit of a known entity when it comes to LAN. Gentlemates looked okay on LAN, but it was really only Martinez. I'm not entirely convinced about drafting any of the other players, but he was really solid and I think could be a really good pick at 206 because they've got an okay chance of going through. Although again, Bait beat them, so I'm not 100% sold, but Martinez, decent value. Don't really love NRG, to be honest with you. I haven't watched a lot of their CS, but I don't really love their pricing, except for maybe Sonic at 184. I do like Inner Circle. This is the former TNL lineup that has been doing a lot of good work in Europe Tier 2 this year. Though I will say the players you want to draft are the ones that are the silver prices, so they're a little too expensive, but I guess if you want like a cheap AWP, you get Flyrax for 183. But I'm not really sure how well they're going to play on LAN, and yeah, I think they're a very risky team to go, but they could catch people off guard. Hotu, I think, a very similar position, but they've got a stand-in going on, if I'm not mistaken. Although Norbert 175, like he's been performing well, but I do think their numbers are a little boosted. Fluxo, I think actually could catch people off guard. And I think Lakowski for 171, he's in the most drafted players. I'm going to draft him just because 171 for Lakowski is ridiculously cheap, and I think there'll be some payoff for him here. Even if they don't get through, I think the amount of money he saves makes him worth drafting. Not really rating Rooster here, unfortunately, but we'll see. I'd love to see them perform, but you know, since losing Natic, I'm not entirely convinced. So let's take a look at what I'll draft. For my draft, I will be doubling down on Astralis because I think they're the best value. I'm going to grab Device and Stare, who have been performing the best on this squad, and I think that they're really good value when you compare them to the other top teams here. I really wanted to grab a bait player. I wanted to grab Kensisaw after his great performance at Star Ladder. And as mentioned, I'm going to grab Lakowski just because of the huge amount of value that he offers. Although I do think Norbert's also a decent choice for value. And then to lock it all in, I will finish with Malbs, who, even though he's not been playing the best, I think that in this tier of the event, he has a good chance to farm against some lesser opposition. And of course, he has brilliant role activation, so that's going to go a long way when G2 go 3-0 and you get all of the extra points. So it's going to be my team. Let me know what you're drafting, let me know what you think, and as always, good luck.